In the previous videos, we have created 3 custom button widget classes that made it easier to write the layout of our sign-in page. In particular, this social sign-in button takes 2 properties called asset name and text, and these properties are required so that the widget knows how to draw itself. I want to quickly show you what happens if we forget to specify one of these properties. So I'm going to comment this out and save. And here I can see that the screen goes completely red with an error in yellow. Additionally, I could open up the console, and if I scroll up, I see a long stack trace, which shows an error as well. In general, this is something that happens when we forget to pass required properties to one of our widgets. And so if we look at the assertion over here, it is not entirely clear, but this says asset name not null is not true. And the reason we get this assertion is that the image.asset constructor that we pass over here really needs to have an asset name that is not null. So in general, this is an error that happens when we forget to pass required properties to one of our widgets. And because we have commented out this line and asset name is a named parameter, then this will take a null value if we don't specify one. So this is not a great situation because we get an error at runtime. It would be a lot nicer if the compiler could help us out here by letting us know that asset name really is a required property. This will be very useful, and fortunately in Dart there is a way to specify when named parameters such as asset name are required. So let me show you what I'm talking about. When we declare named parameters such as this asset name over here, we can use a special annotation called @required. And this tells the compiler that they are actually required. So if I move back to the sign-in page, I can now see that if I hover to this social sign-in button, it tells me the parameter asset name is required. And this is flagged up as a warning, even on the right over here. So the required annotation is useful because it can inform the compiler about which parameters are needed. And this helps us as developers because if we ever forget to provide a parameter that is required, then we can get a warning. And this is very useful because it allows us to find any potential programming errors early. So let's restore the asset name and we can see that the warning goes away. And let's save and reload as well. Okay, so with this knowledge, I think it could be worth to review the custom classes that we have created and make sure that we add the required annotation where necessary. So if we start with the social sign-in button, we can take a look here, and should the text string have a required annotation? Well, the answer is yes, because if this is null over here, then the text widget will throw an error. So we're going to add required in here as well. And what about the other parameters? Well, the color and the text color are optional, and the onPressed callback is also optional. In fact, we have learned early on that we can pass a null callback intentionally to disable the button. So we can head over to our signing button class, and this one takes similar parameters, so the only one that is required is the text string. And finally, we can take a look at the custom raised button class. So here the first property is the child, and this is passed on to the raise button widget over here. Now this is actually not required because we could have a raise button without a child. Then we have color and onPressed, which as discussed are optional. And finally, we have the border radius and the height parameters. Now, because we have provided default values for these parameters, it doesn't make sense for them to be required, because when we don't specify these parameters, then the default values will be used. Okay, so we have reviewed all our widgets and added the required annotation where appropriate. Next, I'd like to give you some guidelines about when to use default parameters and when to use the required annotation, and I'm going to do this in the next video.